Greetings and felicitations. This is Michael Haspel, and you're listening to Quantum Froth Dispatches. Today is another Zero Dark 30 recording of a podcast. So again, my thoughts might be all over the place. But honestly, it's the only time I had to do anything. And before I forget, I want to thank Malukah Phoenix for allowing me to use her song Reignite as part of this podcast. It means a lot to me and actually helped me process what turned out to be way more emotional than it should be, because it's just a video game, right? Well, no, it's a story. And today is N7 Day, if you're listening to this on the day I released it. And I wanted to ideally record essentially my review on a replay of a re-released Mass Effect Trilogy, which has been in the rumor mill. I guess the name is supposed to be like Mass Effect Legendary Edition now. But that has been announced through rumors again. I have nothing official. That it's been delayed until 2021, like so many other things. So I did want to put something out for N7 Day, and that'll be what follows.
This is Dropkick with a red dash alpha message in 2 parts. Break.
Hope can drown, lost in thunderous sound. Fear can claim what little faith remains, but I carry strength from souls now gone. They won't let me give in.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of BioWare and Mass Effect? No? I thought not. It's not a story the Council would tell you. It's a gamer legend. BioWare was a game company so powerful and so wise, they could use great stories to bring mere computer games to life. They could actually make people care about computer game characters. They became so powerful, they attracted the attention of a larger company, which was a pathway to many abilities some consider unnatural. They taught this new company everything they knew, but unfortunately, that company didn't have the same values. They strangled and hobbled and lessened BioWare in a mad rush to completion, loot boxes, and Day 1 DLC. BioWare, which had become known for superior stories, couldn't conclude the story of their flagship franchise, and instead thought that blaming their fans would be the best strategy. Ironic. Is it possible to learn how to avoid a similar fate? Perhaps, but not from a specter.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So I don't know why I started this episode with a shoddy interpretation of Palpatine and a mangled and repurposed Star Wars quote. I wonder why I would have done that. Don't know what possessed me. Anyway, 2 things I need to get out of the way. One, this is going to be full of spoilers, most likely. I'm talking off the top of my head, so disclaimer: if I get names wrong, if I get some order of sequences wrong or something, then that I'm completely to blame because I didn't do any research for this. I was like, I want to put something out for N7 Day, and Mass Effect is something very near and dear to my heart. And the second thing I want to talk about, other than heavy spoilers, is that I really do love Mass Effect. Now, I'm sure that at certain points in this podcast, it's going to sound like I don't like it. That couldn't be further from the truth. I adore this franchise. It's one, in my opinion, it's one of the best sci-fi franchises out there, not just for computer games, but just in storytelling and everything. And it's unique in the sense that you're the hero. You're playing through this. You're the protagonist. You're the one making the decisions. So it's really, really cool in that sense. But I do have to consider the story of Mass Effect, not the story in Mass Effect, but the story of Mass Effect and BioWare and EA as a tragedy. And unfortunately, it's one we see repeated again and again and again. And lately, it's kind of become the norm to the point that I kind of don't want to get invested in franchises anymore, because I just know they're going to fumble. And it's easily avoidable. So I kind of want to just jump into a retrospective here, and we'll start with Mass Effect 1 at the beginning, right? So the game's pretty old now. I think it's maybe 12 years old, maybe a little older. And it's definitely shows its age. I tried to load it up and I was like, wow, this has not aged well. It is clunky in the gameplay. The graphics and animation are really dated. It really does show its age. And that's part of the reason why EA and BioWare have, according to the rumors, delayed the Mass Effect Legendary Edition, or the remastered trilogy, is because they said that they needed to have more time to fix Mass Effect 1, to bring Mass Effect 1 up to modern gaming standards. And my answer to that is, guys, take all the time you need, because not taking the time is what made you botch it the first time, right? Not Mass Effect 1, but the trilogy itself. So I'm like, okay, it's delayed until 2021. Delay it, I'll play it when it comes out, and I want that experience. I want it to be the best thing that it can be. That I want it to fulfill the potential that was there. And so it, in any case, just to get back to this, the BioWare was known for a number of different games, and right before Mass Effect, they were known for Knights of the Old Republic, or KOTOR, as most gamers refer to it. It is a fantastic game. I actually found myself replaying it on my iPhone, of all things, because they released it for iOS. So, and it still holds up. It still plays really, really well. The story is solid. Very, very good Star Wars story. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend it. It does show its age. It is old. I mean, it's older than Mass Effect 1. So, but the story, man, oh, so good. So, what happened with that was that BioWare realized that they wanted their kind of own space opera, where they weren't tied to Star Wars and the whims of Lucasfilm and what was going on. And part of the allure and the advantage of KOTOR is it's set something like 10,000 years before the prequels, so they could do whatever they wanted within reason. I mean, but there are Jedi and Sith running around. It's great fun. But ultimately, they're tied to Lucasfilm and Star Wars, right? So all the merchandising tying to KOTOR, everything else, anything they want to do, they now have to screen through another company, that's going to veto or approve any decisions they make. So it's easy to see why that becomes unpalatable in a long-term thing. So when KOTOR 2 came out, that was pawned off to a different company. BioWare did not work on that. And the reason why BioWare didn't work on that was because they were busy working on their own space opera, their own IP, and it was called Mass Effect. And it is full of sci-fi tropes. I joke with my brother all the time. I call Babylon 5 the Mass Effect show because a lot of A lot of Mass Effect, you can tell, was influenced by Babylon 5. There are a ton of sci-fi tropes throughout, but essentially they created their own universe with a great story. It had so much backstory. One of the things that I loved was the codex that's in in Mass Effect. It would actually read it out loud to you with these entries, and you didn't have to actually listen to it or read the codex to understand or play the game. You could just bypass all that stuff, but it just added so much richness, and it had all these different races. And you know what? Humanity wasn't just one race among many. Humanity wasn't really well liked, and we're the new kids on the block, and had basically fought a war against the Turians, who are kind of the council's military. You know, all the other races kind of look to the Turians for defense and everything, and they run into humans, and it's a first contact war. But you never get to see any of that. That's all backstory, and it was so rich. And they didn't just mention it; it's seeded all the way through, and it was just absolutely fantastic. You have to win people's trust over. There's prejudice, there's racism, but it's basically humans against everyone else, or the other races not liking humans, like the Batarians like hate us. So I thought that was really, really, really cool. On top of that, BioWare had the customization of character creation, where you could choose your origin story and then choose your appearance and choose your gender. So a lot of people, if I use male pronouns referring to Commander Shepard, that's because the first time I played through, I played as kind of myself. I built myself into the game. So to me, Commander Shepard is a guy, but to a lot of people, Commander Shepard is a woman. And what I really liked, especially with like Mass Effect 3, when you played through as a different gender, you actually got some different dialogue options. And I thought that was brilliant, because people are going to see things differently based on their gender, like how things are going to work. Miranda may not come across as such a nice person if you're another woman. So I just thought that was a really, really cool. Lots of great decisions made and everything. And the first game pits you against a Spectre gone rogue, right? So, and then you're the first human Spectre, so you have all this stuff to live up to and everything, all these different sci-fi tropes. But it introduced a race called the Reapers, and they come through the galaxy like every 50,000 years, and they just cull everything, level the playing field. So, and they are more technologically advanced than all the other races, even though they're kind of legend. No one has really seen them. They've kind of heard of them. They've seen evidence of them. And they know that this other race that used to be in the galaxy, the Protheans, where a lot of people have reverse engineered their technology, and these Mass Effect relays that make the galaxy actually navigable were created by them, and it's leftover tech from their society. So they know that if the Reapers took these guys out, they're going to take out everybody else that's, this time around, because they haven't achieved the same level. And the Citadel, which is kind of the Babylon 5, except it's a heck of a lot bigger, of Mass Effect, is a holdover. It's like a relic. There's actually like people studying the archaeology of the Citadel to try to figure out what's going on. The characters in Mass Effect are what make the game. Just like, in writing circles, I've heard somebody say something that your plots can be the best plots ever created, but nobody cosplays a plot. People care about characters. So the characters in Mass Effect, Rex, Liara T'Soni, Miranda, Kaidan, Williams, Joker, Dr. Chakwas, Grunt, and of course, Garrus, right? All these characters are your crew, and I know I'm leaving a ton out. But if you can have conversations with all of them, and sometimes the conversations go nowhere. They don't offer you a choice or a decision or whatever, or even further the game. They're just there. There's actually a kind of funny trope, and I have this on my coffee mug. It just says, "I should go." And that's how Shepard winds up ending a bunch of these conversations that are they're added in there to add backstory and character to your crew. But it's just kind of like, there's even a video out there of somebody who has looped Shepard and Rex talking to one another, and it's like when you clicked on Rex and you had exhausted all the dialogue opportunities up until that point, he would just say Shepard. So there's somebody out there that edited something where he's just like, Rex, Shepard, Rex, Shepard, over and over again. And then sometimes the only option you had was, you would say Rex, and it would pop up, and the only option you had was, I should go. So that kind of became like an inside joke. But in any case, these characters were, they have more backstory and character than most stories do nowadays. Like, it's actually kind of sad to see how thin things have gotten, for lack of a better word. It's like, not only is there no patience among the people consuming it, but the creators almost have no patience in presenting a character or something. It's kind of tragic. But in any case, the ending of Mass Effect 1 is on par with some of the best action endings of any sci-fi franchise. It pays off satisfactorily. It's fantastic, right? So a couple years later, BioWare comes out with Mass Effect 2, which is my favorite of the franchise. It's the one that I've replayed over and over and over and over again. And Mass Effect 2, in fact, if somebody is a new player and, the Mass Effect Legendary Edition isn't out yet, and you try to get into Mass Effect 1 and you can't because of the clunky gameplay and animation and stuff like that, you can actually just jump into Mass Effect 2. You will catch up very, very quickly. And one of the reasons, which I thought was actually really, really smart, it is far-fetched, but it is BioWare kind of doing their best to not really reboot it, but to allow people to jump into the story kind of midway. So Mass Effect 2 takes place pretty, a little while after Mass Effect 1, but pretty soon afterwards. And the game, which presents a really, really shocking intro, honestly, and I don't even know if I want to tell you this, because this is like such a huge spoiler. And if you haven't played it, well, if you haven't played it, this is a huge spoiler. This is another chance to bail on this podcast, because I really need to talk about this. It was a genius decision. Right away in the game, within maybe, I don't know, half an hour of gameplay, they kill Commander Shepard. And I was just like, wow, I did not see that coming. So who am I going to play as now? Commander Shepard. What? And so they have a project where Cerberus, which is kind of this underground pro-human pseudo-terrorist organization, or freedom fighters, depending on your point of view, has reconstructed Commander Shepard because they think he's or she is the ideal of what the humans have to offer to the galaxy. And they want Shepard to work with them so they can get an advantage over the other races. So they bring Shepard back. And it's actually Really, really cool. But that's why I was saying that you can just jump in and play that, because the game does a very good job of summing up what happened in Mass Effect 1. And if you have played Mass Effect 1, you can actually import all your decisions from the first game into the second. And it was a great choice, really, really good. And I don't know which order I need to talk about this. And so I'm kind of scattered all over the place. One of the things I want to talk about is the decisions, right? So the decisions actually change a lot of the game, and you can kind of see some leftover KOTOR stuff in there, right? So in KOTOR, you had the light side of the Force and the dark side of the Force. And based on different decisions that you made, you could use different Force powers, right? So you could lean towards Sith or lean towards Jedi. Mass Effect has the same thing, only they call it Paragon and Renegade. And Paragon is, you're the peak of morality. You do everything by the book. You're perfect, right? And then Renegade is, you're more kind of like a crazy spec ops person. You're a lot more ruthless. You play a lot of dirty tricks and stuff, and you can mix and match. You're not tied to doing everything as a renegade or everything as a paragon. But as you play the game, if you max out one or the other, it offers you different choices that you can do. And you get presented with options that if you were playing straight renegade, you get options that you wouldn't get. Otherwise. So I thought that was amazing. The other thing that I thought was really, really cool, and at first I was not okay with it, was this whole kind of romance option added to this game. And they've done that, since in Dragon Age and stuff like that. But it winds up adding a lot to the game. You become very invested in like what these computer characters think of you. And it's kind of like a primitive dating sim, but it's a lot of fun. And I found myself replaying the game and just going, hey, what would happen if I try to romance Garrus? Or what would happen if I tried to do this, right? And just playing through and just trying to see all these different options. And I can't even imagine what the script for Mass Effect would look like as far as all the decision trees and everything going on. It's very, very involved, but it made the game fun. It made it so much fun. And then when you go on a mission and you get, one of your characters dies, one of your crew dies, it really hurts. And sometimes it's unavoidable. And speaking of that, I have to do a shout out to an inside joke that's in the game. If you've been on the internet and you're a gamer, you've heard of Leroy Jenkins. And the idea is they were playing I think it was WoW or something, and his entire clan is getting ready to enter a room, and he's kind of off. He's AFK, right? So, but his entire clan is getting ready to enter a room, and they have everything planned out. And Leroy comes back, from getting his dinner, and he hasn't heard anything. And so he gets back, and they're all sitting there outside this instance, with a bunch of bosses in it. And Leroy goes in and just yells, "Okay, let's do this. Leroy Jenkins." And he runs into the room, and they all have to follow him, and they all get slaughtered. So at the very beginning of Mass Effect 1, there is an inside joke where you have a crewman named Jenkins. And he gets down to this planet. I think it's Eden Prime, if I remember right. They get down to this planet, and he is the textbook red shirt that they kill off right away to let you know, hey, the stakes are real, right? There are real stakes here. Crew members can die, right? So, but what was hilarious is that he is crew member Jenkins, and I never even caught it when I was playing the game. And then what he says is, okay, let's do this. And he runs out and just gets massacred like right away. So I was just like, classic BioWare, really good inside joke. I didn't even catch it on my first playthrough at all. I caught it on like maybe my second playthrough and only when he got killed. I was like, wait a minute, what was that guy's name? It was Jenkins. Oh no, I can't believe that. Right. So they have little inside jokes and stuff like that. If you search YouTube, there are all kinds of little meme videos and memes about Mass Effect because of that, right? And the second game introduces a really complex villain and they had A-list voice talent throughout. And this character, the Elusive Man, is played by Martin Sheen. And he does an incredible job. Just an incredible job. And there's all kinds of stuff that goes on with the Elusive Man. He has his own agenda on what they want to do, right? And so it starts off where here he is, your sponsor. He's giving you everything. They've rebuilt the Normandy, which is your ship, which is amazing. And as iconic, I would say, as the Enterprise or the Rocinante, which incidentally, if you marry the Expanse with Babylon 5, you pretty much have Mass Effect movie. Especially after the last season, I just started referring to Holden as Commander Shepard because it was like that's one of the, I adore the Expanse too, but one of the things that seems a little sketch is that unless Holden and the Rossi are there, the story doesn't seem to progress. So it's like Holden has to be involved for things to happen. And granted, he's the point of view character, so it does make sense. But it's just kind of like, and all this stuff was happening, and until Holden showed up to fix it, just like Commander Shepard, it wasn't going to get fixed. But yeah, it's just really interesting, and I adore all that stuff. But what's really cool about Mass Effect 2 is that it has one of the best computer game soundtracks around, and all of Mass Effect does. But there's a piece of music at the end of Mass Effect 2 called Suicide Mission. And it is one of the best pieces of music out there. I use the Mass Effect soundtracks whenever I'm writing sci-fi. Mass Effect is in my playlist for sure, because all those, even the music that plays when you're just like kind of grinding and looking for different elements on different planets, which is one of the tedious things about Mass Effect 2, especially upon replaying it. You're like, oh man, I have to go through all this stuff to find the different elements that I need to craft this one thing. It's kind of, it is grindy. And I'm glad they toned that down in Mass Effect 3 because it was kind of bad. And in Mass Effect 1 they had a similar kind of grindy thing, but it was like Mako missions, and you had this little kind of ATV / armored personnel carrier kind of thing that went out, and you'd drive around on these planets trying to find stuff, and it got kind of grindy. So hopefully when they redo that, they minimize the grindiness of that stuff, if they remaster it kind of well. But anyway, to get back to like the Suicide Mission, I found myself doing a lot of reloading and a lot of replaying to make sure that I didn't want to lose any of my crew. And it turns out you can actually complete the Suicide Mission with everybody making it. But it's not easy, and the first time some of your crew just buy it because of the decisions you make in this Suicide Mission, you're just like, whoa, this is, it hurts. You're just like, I don't want that to happen, which is, again, fantastic. That's what you want out of this experience, out of this game. And then, that brings me to Mass Effect 3. Which is what makes this whole thing a tragedy. Mass Effect 3 is such a good game that there are entire sequences in the middle of the game where it would be the climax of a different game. of a lesser game. It would be the finale, but instead it's just in the middle of the game. And one of them is like a character, a Solarian, named Dr. Morden Solis, and they introduce this thing called the genophage that is meant to keep another race called the Krogan, who are very aggressive, from reproducing. So the race is slowly dying out, and it's essentially a slow motion genocide. Which, yeah, you're like, wow, we're actually confronting stuff like this in a computer game. It's really, really cool. The conclusion of that storyline in Mass Effect 3 is, it would have been a satisfying ending to any other video game. And in Mass Effect 3, it's just like, oh, that was just an episode. That was unbelievable. So, Mass Effect 3 builds up. It has some of the best computer game moments ever. And then before I get to that, let me talk about some other stuff that they did, right? So one of the other things that they did was this cross-pollination, I could guess. There is a galactic readiness index. And in the plot of Mass Effect 3 overall is that the Reapers are coming. They're here, right? And so Shepard has to go around and kind of convince everyone in the galaxy that they need to work together to stop the Reapers and assemble this massive fleet, or the Reapers are going to kill everyone in the galaxy. So that's essentially what the game is about. You're going around to all these different races. You're trying to get them to make peace in the case of like the Geth. You're trying to do different things so that everyone can help you. You're assembling this massive coalition. And you're limited if you just play the main game, which has positives and negatives, because I don't know how they're going to do that now with the remastered edition, right? It's you could play the multiplayer, and that would give you additional galactic readiness points based on how you did the multiplayer. And there was also an app that you could get. And the app, the coolest thing I thought was for the app was that you could listen to the codex on all these different entries. It was actually in the app, but you could do these little things in the app and boost your galactic readiness. And it was an easier way to boost your galactic readiness than the multiplayer. And the reason you wanted to do that is because if you didn't have your galactic readiness up to a certain level, it didn't show you certain options. You just didn't get certain options. You didn't get to use certain things. And some people are like, well, you didn't get the quote unquote good ending. And I will talk about that in a moment, because in my opinion, at least originally when it came out, Mass Effect 3 did not have a good ending. There was no such thing. So, a lot of people were satisfied by it, but that's a different feeling than whether or not it was a good ending or not. And I'm not here to kink shame anybody who adores the Mass Effect 3 ending. That's great. That's awesome. You can find people that think that The Phantom Menace is the greatest movie ever made. That's their opinion. That's great. And who am I to talk about these things and counter them? I'm just a dude in his basement and, talking about a game I liked. But there is a lot of evidence to show that like Mass Effect 3's ending was not good. And one of them, before we get to talking to the ending, exactly, right? I want to just cover the differences between a bad ending and an ending you just didn't like, right? So there are plenty of movies that I've seen, plenty of stories that I've read where I've gotten to the end and I'm just like, well, I didn't like that ending. A good example I can think of is HBO's Watchmen. The final episode, the way that ended, I was not satisfied with, in the sense that it did tie up every storyline. It concluded it. It was a good ending, but I did not like it. I was just like, well, that's not the ending I would have gone with, but it was a good ending in the sense that it closed up everything, and that's one of the reasons I don't think they're moving on with a season 2, is it doesn't need a season 2. It got all tied up. It's done. It's over, right? There are lots of stories where have endings that you're not supposed to like. They end in tragedy. They end badly for people, but they're still good endings. If you watch Breaking Bad, you might not like what happens to Walter White, but it's a good ending. It closes the story. You don't leave going, I don't know what happened. None of this made sense. It's almost like the people who wrote the ending had nothing to do with the rest of the story. And unfortunately, that is a big trend nowadays. It seems to be tied to certain people, certain producers, certain writers that keep getting a lot of work and keep dropping the ball in the third act, and coming up with unfulfilled, just not good endings. And I will get back to that in a moment as well, because that's going to tie. I actually have a point that I'm getting to. One of the reasons I say that the ending to Mass Effect 3, no matter which ending you got, is a bad ending, is that if BioWare wanted Mass Effect 3 to be the final installment ever, and they never wanted to have anything to do with it again, the ending kind of makes sense. It's very nihilistic. It doesn't give you much hope. And to those who don't know, they wound up giving you 3 choices. And no matter which one of the 3 choices you made, the outcome was identical. The only thing that was different was that you got a different color explosion at the end. And one of the things they did was they destroyed all the Mass Effect relays. Unfortunately, if you paid attention to the game, when the Mass Effect relay got destroyed, it would take the entire solar system it was in with it. So that meant that everyone in the galaxy died. Everybody who wasn't on their home world is all that's left. It's terrible, right? So there's no future for anything that comes after that ending. But BioWare had plans for the Mass Effect franchise. There was DLC to come down after the ending. They wanted. There were hints of other installments, which we now know is Mass Effect Andromeda. There was an anime in production. There were talks of a feature film. There were novels. There were comic books. There were games on other platforms like tablets. All kinds of stuff. Right? All that came to a total end. Bang. Because when you played that ending, there was nowhere to move forward to. And from what I understand about Andromeda, not having played it, they had to basically take it to a totally different galaxy. After all that world building, after all that story, backstory, all that stuff that you did, didn't matter at the end of Mass Effect 3. And Mass Effect Andromeda, from a lot of people that I've spoken to that have played the game, they say it's a decent enough game, but it's not a Mass Effect game. It's like, even though it's like there is N7, the Spectres are there and stuff like that, it just doesn't feel like a Mass Effect game. And it's like, well, of course not. They've changed the entire dynamic. They've changed everything. And one of the reasons, and now we'll get into like the actual ending of Mass Effect. So Shepard goes up into, he has this whole confrontation with the elusive man, which is fantastic. You have this really, really great, touching scene. And then Shepard goes up to confront this thing called the Catalyst, which is, for lack of a better term, the Star Child kind of trope that infests most of sci-fi, which honestly, if your name is not Arthur C. Clarke, you probably shouldn't do it. Just avoid it. It doesn't work out. Didn't work out for V. It doesn't work out for most stuff. It certainly did not work out for Mass Effect. So the Catalyst gives you 3 choices, right? And he says there are other decisions that you can make, like you can in the extended ending that they released, you can actually kill him, but it doesn't change anything. It just gives you a little bit of satisfaction. But really, the 3 choices don't matter, right? So the 3 choices you're given is that you can try and control the Reapers and take them over, or you can integrate all synthetic and organic life and thus end the purpose for the Reapers, because for whatever reason, the Catalyst is an alien-created AI, and it kind of believes that organics and synthetic life can never coincide, except that missions within Mass Effect 3, you actually accomplish that synthetic and organic life is working together. So you have proof that he's wrong, that the Catalyst is wrong. So, and the third choice is that you can destroy the Reapers, right? And it's like, but if you destroy the Reapers, all synthetic life in the galaxy is going to die, which means that all the Geth are gone, right? So I do like the fact that it presented you with 3 unpalatable choices. You're just like, none of these is a good choice. This is bad, like all around. I loved that part of the ending, was that, okay, this is all, there's kind of no way out of it. Is you have to make this choice that it's going to be bad. But here's a major problem, and it's almost like they're trying to gaslight you into thinking you do have 3 choices. You really only have 1. And it's the destruction of the Reapers. And the reason why I say that is that because controlling the Reapers, that's the elusive man's idea. And he is, as you'll recall, the villain. He's a villain at the end of Mass Effect 2 and in the 3rd game. He is a villain, right? Joining all of synthetic and organic life, that's Saren's plan. He's the villain from the 1st game. So the first 2 choices are actually the villain's choices from Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 and 3. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense that all of a sudden you would pick what the villains want to do. And the main reason those are wrong is because not only were they the villains, and that's their plan, right? But if you had the right dialogue choices, you could actually talk to both of them. And when they realize that they were being controlled by the Reapers, indoctrinated, and we'll get to that in a moment, they actually commit suicide. You don't actually defeat them by killing them. They commit suicide. When they realize what they just about pulled off, they go, oh no, I almost did that. And they kill themselves. And that's a pretty good indicator that that's the wrong choice to make when the person who was advocating for that choice kills themselves upon seeing that they almost pulled it off. And yet, that's 2 of the choices that you have. So if you pick destroy the Reapers, but it doesn't change anything. Of course, the first time I played the game, I got to the end and I was like, that is such a bad ending, because there was no way forward. There was no hope. There was no, how is there going to be a Mass Effect 4? I guess there's not going to be a Mass Effect 4. That I must have done something wrong, right? So like a good gamer, I reloaded everything, right? I reloaded everything and I played it again. And I was just like, and this time I chose different stuff. It was the identical ending. It just had a green explosion or a blue explosion or a red explosion. And that was it. And I just really couldn't believe that after all the hard work, after all the world building, after all the let's make our own space opera so that we don't have to pay Lucasfilm their money on all the merchandising and all the other stuff, that they killed Mass Effect. They killed their own franchise. And there's evidence that EA and BioWare knew that they had messed up, because a couple months later, they put out the extended cut, which was kind of a hastily redone ending. It was almost like a slideshow that explained what was going on, because in the original ending, there were a billion plot holes. You could tell it was rushed. And the story behind it, I don't know the entire story, but essentially EA was impatient with Mass Effect 3. It had been delayed several times. And they just basically were just like, hey, this needs to get out. And I know that like certain high level personnel that were involved with Mass Effect 3, like the lead writer and stuff, kind of quit in protest or quote unquote retired at the most inopportune time. And I think that they brought in a team to finish Mass Effect 3 that really were not up to speed on the original vision of the game and what they needed to do. And they killed their franchise, which is why Mass Effect is a tragedy, because a diehard fan like me didn't even want to play Andromeda. I didn't care anymore. I walked away. And that brings me back to some things that we saw with Mass Effect, and maybe why I started this with a quote from Star Wars. Because the creators of Mass Effect, when they heard the backlash of people going, what? This ending makes no sense. It's full of plot holes. It is a bad ending. It just not good. You know, it left a lot of things open. It left no room to progress forward. So like I said, if you wanted to just end it and be like, hey, this is the final Mass Effect, nothing else is coming after this, then okay. But when you're promising people an anime and novels and comic books and all this other stuff, why would you kill your franchise? And yet that's precisely what they did. So there was a lot of backlash. And the internet, being the internet, was very vocal and unkind, right? So what happened is the creators of Mass Effect that were still there, a lot of people, I mean, BioWare just hemorrhaged people after this. The creators decided that they were going to hide behind artistic integrity and said that it was their artistic choice to come out with that ending, which I think is complete bull. But that's what they decided to do. And then they took on a tactic that other companies have done since, and they blamed the fans, right? It was the fans' fault. The fans were toxic. The fans were the ones to blame for why Mass Effect 3 was unsatisfying. And in their defense, Mass Effect 3 is not unsatisfying. Only the ending is, right? But that's kind of the most important part. They blame the fans. And we have seen this tactic used again and again. We saw it used with Ghostbusters 2016, where they put out a crappy movie, for lack of a better term, of a beloved franchise, right? A remake of a beloved franchise, and they half-assed it. And when they realized that they were going to get a lot of backlash, they turned into fan shaming, fan blaming. It was the fans who were toxic. It was the fans' fault, right? People paid attention. It seemed to work anyway, right? They got people to go see the movie and actually even come out and say that it was better than the original and that it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. In fact, read any of the reviews that came out at that time, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And essentially, that franchise is dead. For folks not in the know, there were plans, Dan Aykroyd had plans for an entire Ghostbusters universe, and I think it was called the Ghost Corps or something, and they may try to resurrect that after Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021, depending on how that does. But there were plans for new cartoons, new comics, novels, all these different spin-off movies, like essentially like an MCU of Ghostbusters. 2016 put a dramatic end to that. Another example is Game of Thrones, right? So Game of Thrones, there were plans for prequels, sequels, spin-offs, all kinds of different stuff tied to Game of Thrones. The ending, so terrible that not only did HBO cancel all of those things, to my knowledge, none of those projects are moving forward. And the creators lost their Star Wars trilogy. And I should probably mention that too, that there seems to be a trend there where the creators are impatient to close up the franchise that built them, right? They just want to move on to bigger and better things. So once the creators of Game of Thrones were given promises of a Star Wars trilogy, they were impatient with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was boring now. Everybody wanted to move on to a different project. HBO would have given them an entire other season if they wanted it. And it's the tragedy in that is that they really hit something so unique. They had normies, quote unquote, talking about dragons around the water cooler. I don't think that'll ever happen again. They had so many people involved in Game of Thrones. That's what everyone was talking about. It was the biggest moment in the zeitgeist for all of fantasy. And I don't think they'll be able to re-achieve that because us fantasy fans will tune in to whatever, the Wheel of Time or the Stormlight Archive or anything like that comes out, as a TV show. We'll be into it, right? But to get the regular crowd, the normal people, to tune in, I don't think they're going to. I think Game of Thrones poisoned the well. And they're not going to come back. They're going to remember what happened with Game of Thrones. And they're probably not going to get as invested emotionally or intellectually or anything. And as a side note here, if you're a fan of Scotch, all the Game of Thrones tie-in scotches that they had, they're all marked down. I was able to buy some Talisker for like $40. Which is good if you like Scotch, but it just shows. And I said, hey, how come all these are like on clearance? And the lady at the liquor store said, well, because after that ending, people don't want to have anything to remind them of Game of Thrones. And I was just like, ouch, but hey, good deal for me, right? So jumping back into that, right? The biggest one, right? Monetarily, is Star Wars. And you'll find people that say that the Disney trilogy is the bestest, greatest thing ever. I think it's demonstrably not. The fact that Disney is doing everything in their power to make people forget about the Disney trilogy. Hasbro is not even making toys based on the new trilogy anymore. Everything is based on the original trilogy. They've gone back to that. If you walk into a Target and just go into the toy aisle and look at all the Star Wars toys that are there, they're there. They have lightsabers and Baby Yodas and all kinds of different stuff like that. They're all branded Galaxy's Edge. The theme park part of it. They don't say Rise of Skywalker. They all say Galaxy's Edge. The new game that Star Wars Squadrons that just came out, which is fantastic, by the way. If you like space combat kind of dogfighting sims, it is really, really good. But they set it kind of in its own time, but it's essentially the original trilogy time. It's immediately after Return of the Jedi, and you're dealing with, they don't really call them this, but you're dealing with the remnant of the Empire. So it just seems like the direction there is that they just went, hey, we realize we screwed up, and please forget all these things. And I suspect they're gonna do some kind of retcon where those stories are no longer canon, just like they did with the quote unquote Star Wars Legends. But we saw all of this happen with Mass Effect. And EA did release an extended cut, right? And the extended cut, this extended cut fixed a bunch of the plot holes. It gave you a more satisfying ending, I would say, but it was still terrible. They retconned some of the stuff where they were just like, oh, okay, the Mass Effect relays are not destroyed completely. They're just heavily damaged. All this stuff, right? And I found a post that I'd made back in 2012 where I played through the ending and initially really liked it. And I just want to read you these thoughts from December of 2012. Well, it's been a few months since I played the ending. Originally, I wrote this article when I just finished it, and I will stand by most of the stuff I wrote here, that I liked the new ending. But I didn't get any of the new DLC. I never played multiplayer again. I stopped playing altogether, and recently, coming to the conclusion that I would never play Mass Effect again, I uninstalled the game. I wanted to uninstall the game out of rage and frustration with the original ending, and this wasn't the case this time. I just had no need to play. The story, Shepard's story, my story, is over. As time has put some distance here, I just realized I had no further interest in Mass Effect. And it's too bad, because I really enjoyed it. But it's like an old D&D module now, like the Ghost Tower of Inverness. That was completely fun to play back in the day, but I don't think I will ever play it again. And if Wizards of the Coast suddenly put out a sequel to the Ghost Tower of Inverness, I'm not suddenly going to run to my closet and dust off all my old D&D stuff just to play it. I'll just look at it and go, they put out a sequel to the Ghost Tower of Inverness. Man, I love that module. And then I'll move on and play another game. And unfortunately, that's where Mass Effect stands for a lot of people right now. Where I think this is interesting is that there's an opportunity to fix things. And I'm actually holding some optimism that the reason that Mass Effect Legendary Edition is delayed isn't just to bring Mass Effect 1 up to modern gameplay standards. I'm hoping they're fixing the ending of Mass Effect 3, knowing how crazy it was. And one of the endings that I hope that they look to is something called the indoctrination theory. And I really can't go into it right now because we're coming up on an hour already. But go on YouTube and look up the indoctrination theory. And it's kind of conspiracy theory material surrounding Mass Effect. But if they did that, it would be such a brilliant twist to the game. And it would explain why two of the choices you were given were honestly what the villains picked in Mass Effect at the end of Mass Effect 1 and throughout Mass Effect 3. It explains so much, and it comes up with such a satisfying story that I really, really, really hope that EA and BioWare do this. And why? Because I want to play Mass Effect 5 if they can fix the franchise, if they can fix it. And it's like, I don't want to play in a new galaxy. I want to play Commander Shepard. So, I think I've said kind of everything I wanted to say. And, oh no, I didn't, right? So I did mention the Mass Effect soundtrack, right? The different soundtracks for all the games, and how when I write, it's constantly in my playlist when I'm writing science fiction. And you have all these different songs by like Clint Mansell and Jack Wall and Sam Hulick. I'm trying to think of the other guys. I think it's like Richard Jock and Chris Lenitz, something like that. I know I'm probably butchering it, but these songs are so good. you know? And my brother and I have a joke that whenever I'm listening to Spotify, there's a song that closed out Mass Effect called Das Malefiz. And every time it comes on, I'm back there. I'm back emotionally. I am back in Mass Effect, and it tugs at the heart. And I'm like, the fact that they were able to do that for a computer game is such an achievement. It's so good. And then I have to shout out Malukah Phoenix again, because when the whole Mass Effect ending thing was happening in kind of real time, and it was so disappointing and just so crushing, Malukah put out a song, and you heard a snippet of it at the beginning of this podcast, and I'm going to close out with that song. And that song gave me the emotional satisfaction that I needed from the ending of the game. And really it helped, it went viral. It helped me discover Malukah. She has a lot of great songs. She does covers of like Skyrim and a bunch of other stuff. She's very, very talented. She, in fact, along with Peter Hollins, does my favorite rendition of a song called Baba Yetu, which came from Civilization. So it's actually another computer game song. But if you've never heard Baba Yetu, you need to listen to their version. It was written by Christopher Tin. He won a Grammy for it. It is an amazing song. So go and check that out and throw Malukah some coin, on some of those songs. She's got them up for sale for like 99 cents or whatever the going rate is on the different music services. But I really wanted to shout her out because when I was deep in the depths of despair of the ending of Mass Effect 3 and just going, all my love for all these characters in this universe, in this world, have all just ended, and they're all gone, and it was worse than like a show getting canceled or, the author of a series of books kind of passing away before they could complete the series. It was worse than that because it was like, hey, we had the opportunity to do an ending and we botched it. And in botching it, we killed the entire universe that this thing was built in. So now I think that's what I had to say about that. And I will close on Keela Salai, everyone. And I am Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite podcast on the Citadel.
I will never surrender, will free the earth and sky, crush my heart into embers, and I will reignite I will reignite. sky, crush my heart.